President-elect Donald Trump calling for an expansion of America's nuclear arsenal, saying he's fine with an arms race as long as the U.S. is winning. Hello and welcome to Happening Now on this Friday. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Laura Ingle in for Jenna Lee. Mr. Trump started the nuclear conversation on Twitter saying, quote, the United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes.
That tweet came after Russian President Vladimir Putin promised to strengthen his nation's nuclear forces. And then Putin held his annual end-of-year news conference. We have live Fox team coverage with Kitty Logan from our London bureau. But we begin with Peter Doocy in West Palm Beach, Florida. Peter.
John, the president-elect right now is playing golf with Tiger Woods at the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach, not far away from Mar-a-Lago, where he stays down here. Woods apparently requested the game, according to transition officials. He's obviously one of the most famous athletes in the world, but Mr. Trump has a message for anybody trying to say that his upcoming inauguration is going to lack star power. He says this, quote, the so-called A-list celebrities are all wanting tickets to the inauguration, but look what they did for Hillary. Nothing. I want the people. The @RealDonaldTrump account has also been active with some policy-related posts in the last 24 hours. Mr. Trump expressed a desire to expand the U.S. nuclear arsenal, with his team later explaining that he is concerned not just about Russia, but also about terrorists and rogue nations. And Mr. Trump is also saying he's ready to move on from the notoriously expensive F-35 fighter jet program, tweeting that he wants Boeing to come up with an alternative. He did meet with Boeing and Lockheed CEOs earlier in the week. It seems the Boeing meeting went better than the Lockheed meeting. The president-elect also making a lot of decisions for somebody who has not been sworn in yet, and his newly minted press secretary, Sean Spicer, says he is not breaking protocol by not asking the president, who's in office right now, for permission.
No, he's the president-elect. He doesn't need to check with people, but I will say this. The President Obama and his team have been unbelievably gracious to the president-elect and his team. We respect the fact that there's one president at a time, but this president is not going to sit back and just wait for things to happen. He's going to get things done.
The Eric Trump Foundation has also just announced that it is going to stop fundraising because Eric Trump admits that some donors could be expecting special access to his dad, the next president. And now his dad, the next president, is weighing in on this. Also on Twitter, he says that he thinks his sons need to stop raising money for sick kids to avoid the possibility of a conflict of interest is a ridiculous shame. John.
All right. He always calls it like he sees it. Thanks very much, Peter Doocy.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin also saying he'd be willing to visit the U.S. if President-elect Trump invites him. The comments came at Putin's end-of-the-year news conference. This is where he addressed everything from U.S. relations to the Berlin terror attack. Kitty Logan live now in our London newsroom with more on this. Hi, Kitty.
Hi, Laura. Well, that press conference lasted almost 4 hours. Nothing unusual there. It's something Mr. Putin does every year. He talked about many things, including US-Russia relations. He was fairly positive about this. He said he expected security and economic ties to normalize in future. He denied any involvement in hacking or interference during the US election, dismissing claims the hackers were Russian. He says the Democrats had wrongly blamed others for losing the election. He also said Russia had expected Mr. Trump to win and praised him for understanding the public mood in America. Now, Mr. Putin addressed the comments the president-elect made yesterday about America's nuclear capabilities.
Regarding the newly elected President Trump, there is nothing new. He was saying during his campaign about the importance of strengthening the nuclear aspect of the United States, about the strengthening of military forces. There is nothing unusual.
There was very little else new from Mr. Putin today, although he addressed a wide range of topics. As you say, he condemned last Monday's truck attack in Berlin. He offered his condolences there and called for better cooperation in fighting terrorism. He also talked about Syria, saying the recent evacuation from Aleppo wouldn't have been possible without Russian help. He says he now wants to see a ceasefire across Syria. Now, Mr. Putin didn't say whether or not he would stand again for re-election as president. He said said he'd make that decision at a later stage. Now, overall, the tone of this press conference is that Russia seems to be expecting relations with the US to improve under the new administration. Laura?
All right, Kitty Logan for us live. Thank you.
Well, President-elect Trump bringing several campaign staffers to the White House with him. In the meantime, he appeared to double down on his tweet about expanding America's nuclear arsenal. This morning, he spoke with MSNBC anchor Mika Brzezinski about it on the phone. Here's how the anchors characterized that conversation.
President-elect told you what?
Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass.
And outlast them all.
And outlast them all.
So what about that characterization? I'm joined by political reporter Jonathan Swan. Is it an arms race that's imminent, Jonathan?
Well, I guess arms races begin with words, and that's certainly what Donald Trump is signaling at the moment. I think there's a couple of contextual things here. One is that he spent Wednesday with top military brass. A lot of these people have quite hawkish worldviews, and it's quite possible that Donald Trump is reflecting some of that input. And I think the second thing is Vladimir Putin made comments about upgrading his own nuclear arsenal. So I think Donald Trump sees it as imperative that the United States won't be pushed around.
His spokesman, Sean Spicer, issued something of a clarification. He said other countries need to be put on notice that he's not going to sit back and allow them to undermine our safety, our sovereignty. We're going to get into Sean Spicer's role in a minute, but is that a bit of clarification that is necessary to this particular story?
Well, this is sort of the problem when you're serving in a communications role for Donald Trump. I'm not talking about this comment specifically from Sean Spicer. I think the more interesting comments were actually from Kellyanne Conway last night and Jason Miller, where they tried to clarify the comments from Donald Trump as this is more of about modernizing and upgrading. And then, of course, Donald Trump sort of undermines that by saying, no, I really do mean an arm race. I really do mean expansion. And that's a pattern of communication that we've seen throughout the campaign. So I think, when Sean Spicer takes the White House press secretary job, he's a very skilled operator, but he's going to have so many of these instances where he does some cleanup and then Donald Trump doubles down. It's just the way Donald Trump operates.
Well, some hawkish language from Donald Trump, but there's also been some hawkish language from Vladimir Putin.
No, that's exactly right. And that's why I said that's important context. Before Donald Trump issued that tweet, Vladimir Putin was saying things about upgrading Russia's nuclear arsenal. And that context has to be discussed when you discuss Donald Trump's tweet.
And as Ronald Reagan proved when he upgraded U.S. military forces and especially anti-nuclear forces, that is eventually what led to the demolition of the Soviet Union and the Berlin Wall.
Well, Donald Trump, has said that his philosophy is the Reagan peace through strength, and there have been a few consistencies in this campaign, and one of them has been the build-up of American military might, and not taking a backward step to any countries around the world.
All right, thanks very much, Jonathan Swan, political reporter, joining us this morning. Jonathan,
Pleasure.
Thanks.
And police say the suspect in the Berlin Christmas market attack has been killed. This after a shootout with police in Milan, Italy. The Tunisian migrant became Europe's most wanted man after that attack in Berlin Monday, which left 12 people dead and dozens more injured. Amy Kellogg live in Milan, Italy with the very latest on this. I also saw one of your earlier reports, a lot of really interesting background on this guy too, right?
Yeah, Laura, and he did pass through France, which is still under a state of emergency before coming here to Milan. So lots of questions. The manhunt, of course, is over, but police both here and investigators internationally will want to know, what was he doing in Milan? Was he stopping here? Does he have a network here? Or was he moving on somewhere else to rejoin other people? What's also extraordinary, Laura, is that the police here didn't stop him because they recognized him from all the media coverage over the past week. They simply thought he looked suspicious. And so they asked for his documents. He did not produce them. He opened a knapsack, shot one officer, wounding him in the shoulder. The officer's partner then shot Omri dead on the spot using a .22 caliber gun, similar to, if not the same one used to kill the truck driver that Omri had carjacked in Germany. Here's a picture of the wounded officer. The one who killed Omri was a young officer trainee. This all happened at 3 a.m. outside a train station on the outskirts of Milan. The station is called Sesto San Giovanni. Omri started his European life of crime and terror here in Italy, and it all ended here. He was wanted for theft in Tunisia, so fled with a group of Syrian refugees on a boat, wound up in Italy, spent time in jail in Italy for torching a school and refugee center, and ended up in Germany when Italy tried to expel him but couldn't gather the right documents. Part of that was down to Tunisia not sending forth documents as well. Then he slipped across open borders to Germany, asked for political asylum there. He was denied. Again, they tried to send him back to his homeland, but Tunisia didn't claim him or send a passport for him to travel home before he managed to kill 12 innocent people at the Christmas market on Monday. Also, Laura, in terms of this interesting background, he was under surveillance in Germany 6 months until this fall. Police suspected that he was organizing a robbery so that he could buy weapons for an attack in Germany, and when they simply didn't come up with the evidence, they dropped this surveillance, and the rest of the story is very clear and tragic from that point. Laura, back to you.
All right, Amy Kellogg for us. Thank you so much for that perspective.
An overseas hijacking has ended now. Authorities say 2 hijackers forced a Libyan commercial plane to divert to Malta. They threatened to blow it up. But after several hours, the Maltese Prime Minister says the passengers and crew got out of that plane safely, and the hijackers have now surrendered. No immediate reports of injuries. It is not clear what these hijackers' demands actually were.
And John, it is that time of year once again, time to keep your cool while traveling home or wherever you're going. You know it's going to be busy, especially with some wicked weather threatening some regions. So what's the secret to a smooth trip?
Go early. Yes, I go early. That's my method.
You definitely have to come early and just be mentally prepared to stand in line and wait.
Well, and in uncertain times, too, it's important to remember the history of this holiday season and why it's important to keep Christmas traditions alive.
And the final chapter of what you might call a house of horrors. This is the home in Woodbury, Minnesota, where Danny Heinrich confessed to killing young Jacob Wetterling 27 years ago. That Minnesota boy disappeared. His disappearance a mystery for so many decades until recently Heinrich admitted to the murder. The home being demolished now by a local developer, Tim Thone. He says that he decided to help end the community's nightmare. That home, owned by the killer of Jacob Wetterling, being demolished right now.
And you may not have this on your calendar, but today is expected to be the busiest travel day of the holiday season, and travelers still feeling the ripple effects after hundreds of flights were canceled at Los Angeles International Airport yesterday. It was a mess, and more expected today. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is live at LAX. He's not a mess. He's looking dapper and looking for those holiday travelers. Jonathan, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Laura. You know, it could be a whole lot better here, but it could certainly be a whole lot worse. Some 173 flights expected to be delayed here through noon Pacific time at LAX. That's a significant percentage of the 630 delays across the entire country. So it's tough for travelers, but they are getting there. I would say the lines at the moment, at least getting to the aircraft through check-in and security, are no worse than they are on any other Friday here at LAX. And the advice to travelers from officials here and indeed across the country is come prepared. Listen here.
If you're checking the conditions at the airport even before you leave your home, check to see what the roads are like, how crowded it is. Make sure you print your boarding pass. Check to see if your flight's been delayed or canceled. That way, before you even come to the airport, you've got some sense of how much time you need to get to the airport.
Now, it's significant that the majority of the delays here at LAX are on arrivals, and that gives you an indication that it is weather across other parts of the country that is causing problems. So there are delays at many airports, and there are significant frustrations for holiday travelers. Listen again.
Yeah, I think it's definitely really crazy. I wasn't expecting so many people.
Pretty much all the flights are oversold, and they're offering, money for people to take later flights and whatnot.
You definitely have to come early and just be mentally prepared to stand in line and wait.
Now, bottom line here at LAX, at least, Laura, it's not as bad as it could be, but we are expecting more bad weather here later, so things could get worse. Remember, nobody in LA can drive in the rain. It seems pilots can't necessarily taxi properly either. That was the cause of most of the delays yesterday. It was drizzle.
Yes, and I remember living in Los Angeles when you and I worked together there at the LA Bureau. You're right. When it rains there, things kind of go sideways. So good luck to you again.
It all falls apart.
All right, Jonathan
Thanks,
Huffless, LAX. Thanks.
It's been 149 days now since President-elect Trump has held a traditional news conference. Well, now his incoming press secretary, Sean Spicer, just named yesterday, giving some new details on how the Trump White House will deal with the press. While the president-elect uses social media to reach the American people directly, our media panel reacts next.
It is absolutely fascinating, and it makes every day, every hour just unbelievable, because you know that you're having that conversation with the American people, and they can have it back with him. When people are wrong, he's going to hold them accountable, and he's going to correct the record. So it's going to be he's used Twitter more effectively and social media between Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Do you like?
That was incoming White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, as it's now been 149 days since President-elect Trump has held a traditional news conference. But senior advisor Kellyanne Conway says there will be daily press briefings in the Trump administration. There had been some question about that. Let's talk about it with Lynn Sweet, Washington bureau chief of the Chicago Sun-Times. Are you heartened that the daily press briefing is not going to go the way of the dinosaur
Sure.
in the Trump administration?
Sure, and happy holiday, John, by the way, and
You
to everyone
too.
out there. I think it's great. What we don't know, though, is will it be televised? Mike McCurry, who is Bill Clinton's press secretary, who started the televised press briefings, has said through the years that he thought it's a bad idea. So we don't know, will it be televised, how long it will be. But I take them at their word. If they have something daily, and if the reporters can have a chance to get questions answered, that's great.
Bill Clinton used to hold the record for the president-elect who had gone the longest without an actual news conference, 9 days. It's been, as we mentioned, 148 since Donald Trump held a news conference. He hasn't had a formal news conference since he was elected. What do you think about that?
Well, since July, what I think about it, I'm a reporter. Of course, I like him to have a press conference. There's so many questions to ask. He promised to have one December 15th to talk about how he would divorce himself from his business holdings. Now he said that's in January. So, press conferences could be long, could be short. You could set them up in a variety of formats, but John, you should do something. And when you have nothing, that's a long time. And I'm hoping now that he has his press team in place, that they figure out a way to have President-elect and then President Trump available on a more routine basis. But yes, of course, 149 days is too long. But whatever that number is, 149 days is too much.
Let's add to the conversation Judy Miller, our Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter and a Fox News contributor as well. Kellyanne Conway, Judy, was on GMA this morning and talked a little bit about press availability in the incoming Trump administration. She, of course, was his campaign manager, who's just been named counselor to the president. Listen to what she had to say.
This will be a traditional White House in the sense that you will have a great deal of press availability on a daily basis, and you'll have a president who continues to be engaged with the press.
The current administration, Judy, as you well know, promised to be the most transparent in history. That hasn't exactly happened. What are you looking forward to under a Trump administration?
Well, I'm looking for more transparency, as is Lynn. I'm looking for more access. And I'm certainly looking for something beyond Donald Trump's favorite communication style, which is the tweet. I mean, it's one thing for him to say, I'm not going to give up DTS, as he calls it, drain the swamp. But it's another to be able to actually ask him a question. And that's very, very important. And it's something that President Obama did not like to do. And I think, by the way, it did not serve him well that he did so relatively few press conferences. So I think that Donald Trump, who has made his mark as a kind of master of media manipulation, will continue to find interesting ways of getting his message across. I wonder whether or not this is going to be a huge role reversal of a White House press secretary actually correcting us rather than us holding them accountable for errors and misstatements of fact.
I don't want to denigrate what we do in the media, but Donald Trump's position is that going straight to the American people through without a filter, as he does via Twitter, that is more beneficial. Judy, what's your reaction?
Look, I think it's a means of communication, but I'm sorry, you know, I believe in the First Amendment, as do you, John, and you, Lynn, and I think most people who look at our checks and balance system. And I think that the press is an indispensable element in a democracy, and that Donald Trump may not like that any more than any other president, and that he will not be unusual. But that's our job. We've got to stick to it. He can have his say, but we will surely have ours. And if you've seen the coverage so far, it has been very skeptical. It's pointed out that the man who promised to bring different people into the government has now selected a cabinet of the 1%. That is the richest people we've ever had in government. Let's see how it works. But he's not going to stop, and we're not going to stop. And it'll be interesting.
The guy he has chosen to be his press secretary is somewhat familiar to the American people, having essentially held that same job for the Republican National Committee. I'm talking about Sean Spicer. Newly named to that position. He was on with Maria Bartiromo this morning on Fox Business Network. Here's what he had to say about communications with the American people going forward. Listen.
We've got one in January that we're going to do. We've already announced it.
Okay.
And I know, but look, I don't think the American people are sitting around saying, when is he going to have a formal press conference? He speaks very frequently and forcefully on Twitter. He has been interviewed numerous times. He's going to continue to speak out often.
I suppose the American people aren't sitting around wondering when the next presidential news conference is, Lynn, but I certainly know the press corps is.
Well, there's a lot to running the country. And there's a lot of questions that you have that often, you know, this is what reporters do. You think of things in the multiple areas of government to talk about. That's what you could address in the press conference without, you know, if the president-elect clearly is going to continue to communicate in Twitter. The Obama White House did. Snapchat, Instagram, blogs. They have tools, but it doesn't mean that you exempt the press, you know, or carve them out from communicating. I just think it's the whole package. I'm really encouraged by what Sean and Kellyanne said. You know, looking ahead, there's no reason to think today that if everyone's operating out of good faith, that the president-elect won't have the ability to communicate directly, which President Obama, First Lady Michelle use direct communications all the time. You know, sometimes, John and Judy, I feel like I have to sign up for everything just to keep up with what the White House puts out.
Yeah.
Because they don't always tell you. You know, we have sent out a picture that's important over Twitter. And you think, heck, why didn't someone send me an email?
Yes, it is
so, you
tough.
know, but
it is
so
tough
it's a lot to keep track of. But I think, you know, I'm very encouraged by what Sean and Kellyanne said. And with all the contentious relationship that's ongoing with the press, if they want to do a reset, fine with me. Let's just move forward and have access. They have their ability to communicate, give us our ability to ask questions and get some answers.
A lot of presidents have battled with the press, and it's a healthy thing in our republic.
It could still
Lynn
be
Sweet,
contentious, but
Judy
at
Miller.
least, you know, let us, yeah.
Thank you both.
Hey, thank
Happy
you.
holidays,
Merry
John.
Christmas. Thanks.
And President-elect Trump promising to get a lot done in his first 100 days, from repealing Obamacare to changing trade deals to rebuilding a wall. Campaign rhetoric, or will he actually deliver? And when is the last time you took a taxi with no driver? Well, California shoots down Uber's plan for self-driving cars, while another state opens its door to the idea.
A Fox News alert, and President-elect Donald Trump has released a new statement on relations with Russia. Trump saying in that statement, a very nice letter from Vladimir Putin. His thoughts are so correct. I hope both sides are able to live up to these thoughts and we do not have to travel an alternate path. That comes in response to a letter from Mr. Putin that Mr. Trump attached to the statement. Here is a portion of that. It reads in part, quote, I hope that after you assume the position of President of the United States of America, you will be able, by acting in a constructive and pragmatic way, to take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as bring our level of collaboration on the international scene to a qualitatively new level. So, there you go. New ways of communicating under President-elect Trump.
And the president-elect hasn't taken office, but he's busy enough. Yesterday, appointing a new communications team, and they were immediately pressed to explain their boss's remarks about boosting America's nuclear arsenal. Well, today, he hit the golf course with Tiger Woods. He's been very busy. Mr. Trump promising to do a lot in his first 100 days, like repealing the Affordable Care Act, reworking trade deals, securing funding for a border wall, and imposing term limits on Congress, and much, much more. So here's Joe Trippi, former Howard Dean campaign manager and Fox News contributor, along with Scott Jennings, former special assistant to President George W. Bush. Welcome to you, gentlemen. All right, we have a lot to talk about. Joe, I want to start with you. President-elect Trump's latest tweet obviously causing some waves about the strengthening our nuclear capabilities. But I want to ask you about the big picture. His first 100 days, repealing Obamacare, reworking those trade deals, building the wall, and of course his promise to begin the very fast, I think he used the word very 3 times, removal of more than 2 million criminal illegal immigrants in his first hour of being in office. So how realistic is all of this, Joe?
It's as realistic as his ability to keep the Republicans in the Senate, for the most part, aligned with his agenda. Because first of all, the first 100 days are critical. It is the period where he's going to be at his strongest to get things done. The first term and the first 2 years of the first term are, but the first 100 days setting that agenda. But the problem for him is, can he hold McCain on an issue? Can he hold Rubio on his immigration policy? It's about holding, because there's only a couple of vote margin for Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Democrats don't have really the possibility. They can delay things, but stopping them, that's going to happen because he loses 2 or 3 votes. And a lot of these controversial things he wants to get done could lose him a Collins in Maine, or a McCain from Arizona, or a Lindsey Graham, for instance. So, can he hold it together? If he can't, he's going to be able to get most of his agenda, most of that 100 days. It may get protests out there, but Democrats are going to be tough to stop it.
And Scott, when we look back at what President Obama's first 100-day plans included in his first run, there were also some big ticket items to get to, like the economic stimulus package. In February of 2009, he presented plans for more troops in Afghanistan. Now, these plans and promises are usually pretty big. How do you think Trump stack up?
Well, he does have a lot of big goals, and the American people in the election results rejected the concept of incrementalism. The American people for the last 6 years have seen the policy movement in this country grind to a halt under divided government, so they unified government under Republican control, and they want Trump to move his agenda. On top of the policy issues that he's fighting for, which are big and complex, he also has a government to build. And so the United States Senate, in addition to moving things like Obamacare repeal, has to spend a lot of time on confirming cabinet secretaries and, the biggie, confirming a Supreme Court justice. So if he gets some of the big executive action things done that he can do on day one, he gets the beginning of movement on passing legislation that he wants to pass, and he starts to build a government and confirm a Supreme Court justice, that would be a huge 100 days, and I think the people would feel satisfied that we're no longer at business as usual in Washington.
Right. And Joe, Mr. Trump has moved at a pretty good pace to select his people, including getting his communications team in place. So I want to ask you, what do you make of his picks?
Look, a lot of them are going to be controversial. Going to have, hearings. The ones particularly that need Senate confirmation, I think. But I think the most of them are going to get through. Again, it's his ability to hold Republicans in the Senate. The House Republicans have a big enough majority that he can lose 10, 20 members from the Republican side and still have the House pass his agenda. The critical thing is, I actually think it's Senators McCain, Graham, some of Collins in Maine are going to be critical to him, much more critical than his loyalists in the Senate. Because if he loses some of them, or Rubio on his immigration, or some of his, or the infrastructure spending, in any of these things, if he loses 2 or 3 Republican votes, he's not going to get that part of his agenda, won't get passed. So, and his loyalists are going to be with him on everything. So the people he has to pay the most attention to tend to be the people he's been, in a lot of ways, the meanest to in terms of his tweets and things. So it's going to be interesting if he can hold that all together.
Right, and that's what we're saying. The communications team that's in place now, getting in place, is going to be very busy in the days to come. So I need to leave it there. Joe Trippi and Scott Jennings, thank you both so much for being here today. Have a great holiday.
Good to be with you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Well, California is said to be the car culture, but Uber's fleet of self-driving cars rejected by California regulators. Now, Arizona's governor is allowing testing of the cars there amid a push for business innovation. William Lajeunesse live in our West Coast newsroom with that story. William.
Well, John, this is a great story. It's about these 2 stubborn giants. It's not about money or safety or this permit. It's really about one company standing up to the nation's most regulated state and an equally tenacious California telling this billion-dollar company, you're not so special. When neither gorilla budged, Uber said, fine, keep your permit. We're going to Arizona, where they don't strangle innovation with red tape.
Just another sign along a list of many that companies see Arizona as a great place to do business. They're fleeing California. They're ditching the overregulation and high taxation. And Arizona is a place that's open for business.
So here's what happened. California requires cars, quote, without active human control or monitoring to get a special permit. Uber claimed all its autonomous cars did have a driver, so they didn't need one. California disagreed and revoked their license to operate. Hours later, Uber fires back, releasing these photos along with this statement. Our cars departed for Arizona this morning by truck. We'll be expanding our self-driving pilot there, and we're excited to have the support of Governor Ducey. Uber joins Tesla, Google, and others testing these cars in Arizona, but first they're going to need to upload their fleet with the latest mapping software. As for the conflict, San Francisco seems happy Uber is gone, while Arizona is more free-thinking.
Autonomous vehicles were making unsafe and illegal right turns through bike lanes, failing to get as close to the curb as possible, and leaving the possibility open of right-hooking somebody biking in their blind spot.
It's kind of cool, but also kind of scary. Like, what if they malfunction and you crash?
So here's the irony. For promotional reasons, Uber claims their cars are self-driving when they're not. California has this autonomous car law when, in fact, none of the 134 driverless cars here actually are driverless because they have a human in the driver's seat. John, the irony is, these cars are going to go to Arizona, but Uber will be back in California. It's too big to ignore. Back to you.
Obviously. William Lajeunesse. William, thank you.
And the recent terror attack in Berlin targeting a Christmas market and all it symbolizes. We'll take a look at the history of Christmas next and why Christian traditions like it are important more than ever. Nice music there. The Berlin terror attack that left 12 people dead targeted a cultural institution. The terrorists chose a Christmas market and all it symbolizes. And it got us thinking about the history of the holiday here and around the world and why it is so important to keep traditions alive. So Bob Richter, our friend here, has literally written the book on Christmas. There it is on your screen. He is an antiques dealer, designer, and the author of A Very Vintage Christmas. Bob Richter joins us now. Thank you so so much for coming in on this very important day.
Thank you.
And bringing some good props. So as we are looking at your props, at first I want to ask you to tell us about the history of Christmas. We, of course, know the reason for the season. But in terms of the actual celebration itself, I think a lot of people might be surprised to know that it hasn't actually been going on as long as we might have thought.
Well, exactly. I mean, 100 years ago, only 1 in 5 households were celebrating Christmas the way we see it now. People didn't have Christmas trees and ornaments. That's a 20th century invention.
Right. Let's talk about what you have here behind us. You're a very vintage Christmas. You've got some vintage items here. Some of them will probably look familiar to some of our viewers. What do you got?
Well, let's start with the ornaments.
Okay.
Ornaments, lights, and decorations are all over my book. Most ornaments that came into this country were from Germany. These ornaments are special because when World War II broke out, guess what? Americans didn't want German ornaments anymore.
Right.
So enter the Shiny Bright Corporation. And these ornaments, just so Americans would know that they were American, feature Uncle Sam shaking hands with Santa.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Right there. And most people recall these ornaments in their attic, and you can still find them out there today at flea markets and garage sales and estate sales and all over the place. I certainly had them.
Right. They are beautiful, and I think a lot of people do actually remember them. Christmas is important for so many people around the world, right? Obviously, we know this, for religious and sentimental reasons, but what do you think is the #1 reason that people wait for Christmas? What is it that brings us together?
You know, we all get a pass at Christmas time to be just a little bit sentimental.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And these objects open up a floodgate of memories. They're emotional, and I really think they're conduits for connectivity. It connects us, and it adds continuity to our lives. Oh, remember this Christmas when we did this? Or when we unpack the ornaments? It's like visiting old friends.
It is.
And it really is, because, oh my gosh, my Aunt Peggy gave me that. Or remember this was on our first Christmas tree. Oh wow, this is an old one. This one belonged to Grandma.
Just had that conversation yesterday in my house with my mother bringing an ornament that was on our aunt and uncle's tree, and it did bring back a lot of memories. But a lot of people aren't so fortunate to have the family memories, and they're alone this year, and we always hear that. So what can people who may not be so fortunate do to either have a tradition, start their own tradition, get involved with somebody else's?
Well, the best way I know how to feel better any time of the year is to give of myself. And so I think if you're feeling low at Christmas time, it's a great time to volunteer, to give away something that means something to you, that has history. Lots of times people bemoan the fact that they didn't get their parents' ornaments.
Right.
Head out to a flea market or any number of antique shops, and they have old ornaments there. And you can buy one like your parents used to have. Bring back some memories, tell others about them, and in a way, these people stay alive through these conduits for connectivity.
I have a feeling that Christmas is on your mind year-round. So what is your favorite, what's kind of a top thing that you look forward to that we can all incorporate into our home? Because I think a lot of us are decorating, trying to get everything ready for the weekend. Is there anything that we can do to add a little more festive punch to our house?
Well, I think the first thing we can do is put down our cell phones and other handheld devices.
I like that.
Beep and ring and text and bleep, and spend time with each other. Do some old-fashioned visiting. Have people over to your home. Go visit them. I grew up in a neighborhood where, the neighbors would bring cookies and we would take cookies to them. Yesterday my doorbell rang and I just expected it was a neighbor who wanted something, and it was carolers. Carolers in this day and age. It made me so happy. I say sing Christmas carols, visit with people, spend time. Now's the time when, everything else can wait until next year.
You're right on that.
Be with your family. Be with your friends.
I think a lot of people will resonate with that message. Thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
My pleasure.
And we want to thank Bob Richter. And obviously, you want to pick up his book, A Very Vintage Christmas.
That's right.
Makes a lot of sense right about now. And decorate your home. Thanks for the tips.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, John, back to you.
All right, some hair-raising moments when a jumbo jet takes off from one of the nation's busiest airports, then gets turned the wrong way. How close this plane came to disaster and what our aviation expert thinks went wrong. Plus, a 7-year-old boy taking a job at McDonald's, at least for a day, but he's on a much bigger mission than just making money. We'll tell you what he's up to.